But yo, my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the BCSN Sports Wrap. My name is Bryan Fulford. My partner in the backcourt, as always, is AD Drew, and we're doing this one a little bit different than what we are normally used to doing it. So from an undisclosed location, far away from his home studio, my man AD Drew. How you doing, my man?
Hey, I'm doing fine. You remember wrestling back in the day when they used to have the wrestlers from parts unknown?
Right.
That's where I am right now, in parts unknown, because I have no idea where I'm at.
Beautiful.
I'm somewhere in the state of Georgia. That's all I can say.
That's all that matters. As long as you know how to get home. That's one thing that matters. Definitely.
GPS.
Man, look, what do we do without GPS? Look, you got me thinking real quick. Were you a maps person? Like look at the phone book to chart where you were going, and then or how did you get around before GPS? What was your go-to to figure out how to get to A to B?
I if I was going to a new area, obviously I would map my way to the city. Then I was a stop at the gas station person to ask for directions and little stuff like that. And once I got there, and I still drive like this to this day, I look for landmarks. Now if that building that was there 10 years ago was not there, or that big oak tree, or the fire hydrant, or whatever it is, if they took that out, I'm gonna be in trouble.
I became very good at giving people directions based on landmarks. It's funny you mentioned that. And I think I got that probably from my dad, who that's how he gave directions. He would say, you're going to go about 3 or 4 lights, and then you're going to see the Burger King at the corner. You're going to turn right at that street. So, and I realized as I was growing up, learning how to drive and navigate through a city, I learned how to pay attention to how many street lights it was, that whole visualization thing. I don't know, do people still even do that? I talked with some students just recently about their driving habits. Drew, I don't think today's youth do that.
No, they don't. I know mine don't. My children do not. They would GPS, send me a pin or give me the address, and boom, boom, boom. They plug it into their phone, and then they're there. That's how they do it. And the other thing, and this is totally off the subject, Bryan. Don't you get mad when you found out that there was a quicker way than the way you've been going for all that time? When you took this route, and then, but if you'd have known about this shortcut when you could have made this left turn here and got on this back road, you could have been there 15 minutes earlier.
That's like you ride with that one person who knows where the shortcut is and how to navigate through it, and you're like, man, that is so much faster than the route that I go to get there. I experienced that a lot, especially in Tallahassee.
And Bryan, I don't know last time you went to Tallahassee, but there are certain parts of Tallahassee that we would not recognize now.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't. As long as the main streets are still there, I think I can make my way around, but yeah, there's probably a bunch of,
especially when you get over there by Florida State.
yeah. One other thing I was going to add is it talked about navigating. Were you one of the people who were you able to, or do you pay attention to the odd and even numbers on a street?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
that
yeah.
one side of the road is the odds and one side is the evens. And so if you had an address that was an even, once you figure out the first where what side of the road, you're looking on that side of the road, right?
Right, and then the 100 block, you figure because
Yes.
some places you go with a block will go for two. It'll go for 2 blocks instead of 1 block and stuff like that. And I give you an oddity where I moved to the even side, the even streets, second, fourth, sixth, et cetera,
Yeah.
are on the north side of town. The odd streets, first, third, fifth, are on the south side of town. And it took me getting lost a couple of times, figuring out, wait a minute, I'm on second, wait a minute, what happened to third?
I was in some city and I stopped trusting that because I realized every city does it differently. I stopped paying
Right. Where I grew up at, it was first, second, third, fourth, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I get here in this part of Georgia, it's 2, 4, 6, 8 down the line. On one side of town is 1, 3, 5, 7 on the other side of town, and the block numbers correspond with that. 200, 400, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I just know after talking with some of my kids recently at school, I think I could earn a second income in helping young people to drive because they take driver's ed online and it gives them no direction. And you know how trying to be in the car with your parents that can be stressful in itself. It's almost like you need.
So they don't have the simulators, bro.
They do have the simulator, but the simulators don't help. I mean, those things are. Anyway, let's try to navigate. Let's change. Let's divert onto another road because we'll be here all day talking about driving directions. I'm gonna try to navigate us through this podcast, this show, because we've got a load to talk about. We've got so much stuff that has gone on over the last 4 weeks. Hopefully, you've been you folks who are listening and watching this particular show.
They're not watching this one, bro.
Well, they may be watching it, but they're just watching it's a watch listen, whatever image is up on the screen right now. I haven't figured all that out in post-production, but obviously that's the magic of a YouTube podcast and however else we drop these video audio shows. Look, there is let me see, we've done shows over the last 4 or 5 days. We've done. And I feel like I'm still now just catching up from the GCAC tournament that we did a couple weekends ago. Then we had the selection show that we did. That was excellent. Again, I have to give you major props for all you did to make that thing happen in terms of the producing it, pulling it together, bringing all the coaches in. It looks like it was well received by every school, every coach that we talked to, and that alumni base and that fan base. I've seen some of the numbers in the podcast shows and then on the streamings. So, and just the retweets of the announcements. So those have been real positive. So shout out to you for doing that. And then of course, most recently we had the interview with Coach Trelane Powell of Tuskegee, as Tuskegee's women are the only team in Division II, men or women from an HBCU that are going dancing. And so now here we are, and we've already got conference tournaments starting in the SWAC. We had a great weekend of football. We probably had the first weekend that actually felt like spring football. I mean, it felt like black college football was back pretty much, or just good football. Maybe not the black college football that we're used to, but it just felt good to actually say we had football, right? That's at least how
Bryan, until we have a fifth quarter, football is not all the way back.
Yeah, but see, but look, I'm not one of those guys that the end of the earth is not the fifth quarter. I'm not that guy. I know you and other people that we talk to, they are. And I've heard from people who say, "Oh, this isn't black college football," and I'm not that guy. I got football games. I got games that matter. I got SWAC. I got Grambling versus Jackson State. I got comments by coaches. I got a game that goes down to the fourth quarter and a crazy finish. I got football. That's all I care about. Now, that's me.
You got the unofficial BAC SWAC challenge.
Yes, the unofficial me. I got bad Vegas lines that needed to be pounded. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it. So I got football. I don't have a fifth quarter. I don't have the bands. So true enough, it's not the traditional.
You don't have the marcher. You don't have the marching up to the stadium.
Yes. So if you're that guy,
you don't have the parades.
Yeah, if you're that guy or you're that gal, I get it. I get it. This is not your thing. But look, for us football people, for pure football, I got what I need. I'm good. I'm just
you got the game.
I got the game. That's all that to me, because I say that, and I say that because when you're not at the game, that's all you have, because television, by most accounts, never captures black college football games like you're used to seeing it in person. They don't, because they don't.
It never will.
Well, I won't say never, because it just depends on who's producing. But
they have not thus far.
They have not thus far. You don't get the bands. You don't get good halftime presentation. You don't get the walk-ups. You don't get good crowd shots. You don't get the dancing girls. You don't get the fifth quarter. You don't get all of that because of television. So
there's a word that describes that, Bryan.
What's that?
Atmosphere.
Right. And I still maintain the best atmosphere that I saw in a black college football game was I think it was the 2018. It was the first year that the SWAC championship game was held at Alcorn State. That game, the ESPN producers hit a home run. They captured everything about that game and that atmosphere. And I have not seen it done that well since, and rarely have I seen it done that well before, my opinion. So, hey, and we even had an all-star game, Drew. We had an NBA all-star game that celebrated HBCU. So let's get into some of this conversation. Again, I want to remind you to like and subscribe this show, whatever platform you're listening, watching, whatever you're doing, however you're hearing us, consuming. Like, subscribe, make sure you make sure to share it with a couple people. When it's all said and done, that's what really counts, that we continue to grow this show, continue to let us know that you enjoy what we're talking about, the conversation. Maybe we're giving you something to think about and have your own conversations at home. Make sure you're following us on social media at MyBCSN1, the number one. Make sure you're going to the website, mybcsn.net. And of course, whenever you want to take a minute out of your time and drop us a cup of coffee, maybe even a meal, a Popeyes chicken sandwich combo, just go to myjbn.com/support. Make your donation there. We appreciate it. Every dollar goes to help keeping this thing afloat so that we can continue to drop good content. A lot of things going on in the Jericho broadcast networks, a lot of shows, Doc's show, the Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. You can catch every show, every episode. I know now they're like 3 times a week now, because at first it was 2.
Right.
Then they're dropping shows on Sunday morning, Drew. We got to step our game up. I feel like Doc's come in and, it's like, he's making us have to step our game up a little bit.
Yeah, and we've got a few more shows that in the talks that we're working on down the line, Bryan.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
The Black College Sports Network is growing, and bigger and better things, especially come fall 21, when we get back to this stuff for real, hopefully.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. I mean, more content, more shows, more voices. That's what we're about. We continue to try to grow this platform, and the more exposure we can give to HBCUs, student athletes, the coaches, the schools, the better off in the long run. So All-Star. Let me go to All-Star for a minute, Drew, because I know actually today as we're recording this, the NBA is coming back with their first set of games after the All-Star weekend, which was in Atlanta. Now, this was an All-Star game that initially they weren't going to have. Then obviously money talks, and the NBA needed to play this game. The TV money said they needed to play it. This was the year, it was actually supposed to be in my hometown of Indianapolis. So to hear that you're not going to do the All-Star, then all of a sudden we're going to do the All-Star game in Atlanta was a little disappointing. But I think the city of Indianapolis is made up for that, given the fact that the entire NCAA tournament is going to be there. So, I think it works itself out. But the theme was centered around HBCUs and the NBA making a commitment to be a part of the HBCU experience. And again, it brings me to my mindset, and one of the things that I'm more consciously talking about is organizations and people that are doing things with HBCUs versus those who are doing things for HBCUs. And so I just want to hear maybe some of your observations or maybe some of your thoughts on some things that you saw that impressed you, annoyed you, or whatever from the All-Star weekend that was in Atlanta.
The All-Star weekend is definitely a for HBCUs. Number one, let's back it up a couple of days before the All-Star weekend when LeBron James and Florida A&M announced the agreement with Nike, and you saw LeBron James wearing the FAMU. I think it was the LBJ 18s. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Brian. But the things that FAMU was able to pull out of Nike in that agreement are monumental and stuff that no other institution, HBCU or non-HBCU, has been able to pull out of Nike, from the scholarships to the being the premier HBCU, meaning that they get certain, if Nike does certain things with other HBCUs, they must also do the same thing with Florida A&M. So kudos to athletic director Courtney Gaucher and the rest of the Florida A&M administration, from the president all the way down, for inking that deal with Nike. That's number one.
And I've got
number two.
Before you go to two, Drew, I've got some of that info. There was a great story in Yahoo Sports. And so I won't spend much time talking about it, because you can go to Yahoo Sports and read it, or we'll make sure to retweet it from our own personal accounts, Twitter feeds, or the BCSN. But you can just type in LeBron James, Nike, Florida A&M, and it's on Yahoo Sports. But it gives some details about the first LeBron James branded Nike college sports apparel agreement. Now, that said, it's similar. If you've seen college sports teams with the Jordan symbol on their uniforms, that's essentially what this appears to be going towards, where, this is like LeBron beginning much like what Michael Jordan did, his first venture into the branding college sports apparel industry. Okay. And so, yeah, it's a 6-year deal that Nike announced, in which Florida A&M will, they're going to outfit all of the programs, and specifically the men and women's basketball teams. They will have unique James crowned uniforms and shoes. Okay. And so that's just a part of it. And I think one of the things you mentioned, Nike is committed to making FAMU the flagship HBCU. That's the key word there, the flagship HBCU. So that's going to be huge. It's probably very similar to what Under Armour is doing with Jackson State, because of Dion, that Under Armour is making Jackson State the flagship HBCU. So I just wanted to just kind of mention that. But go ahead, Drew, with your number 2 observation. I think you were going with.
Did you see Chris Paul's jacket with all 107 HBCUs?
No, I missed that. Was it logos or just the words?
Pins and logos and everything else on there. You know, small 2x2 type logos, but he had every. Supposedly I didn't actually count, but supposedly he had all 107 HBCUs that were on there. And the only thing I questioned about the 107 number is last count I had, we were down to 100 HBCUs, which means the jacket may have been dated a year or two, but that's okay. And there are a few institutions that are, depending on what list you look at, are considered HBCUs. So that 100 number is kind of in flux. So we have somewhere between 100 and 107, and I discovered that doing some other research and then talking to some educators and some other people who are into education at HBCU, who brought up a couple of other institutions that technically they're not HBCU by definition, but they're so HBCU affiliated, they're considered HBCU by the Department of Education.
They it looks like they're patches. I'm kind of looking at just a picture of it from off of one of the websites, I think complex.com, and it looks like it's like patches. They're basically patches on one of those varsity letterman jackets.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you know, I'm really impressed. Chris Paul, who happens to be my birthday-ism, Chris Paul is really, he is stepping into that space that a guy like Bill Cosby used to have back in the 90s, where we associated HBCUs with the Cosby Show in a different world, and Bill Cosby wear a different sweatshirt on his shows. Chris Paul is now sort of moving into that space where, you know, we saw what he did with the shoes during the NBA bubble. We've seen him in terms of the gear, walk into games. It's funny. It's one of those things I think we were waiting on. We were waiting on music stars. We were waiting on some musician, somebody in the world of entertainment to do that. And it just so happens it turned out to be Chris Paul, you know, future Hall of Famer. I think that's fair to say. The product of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but actually is a graduate, or at least he played for Wake Forest, you know, but he has deep HBCU ties. And I think it's awesome that he would use, you know, his presence and everything that he has to him to bring awareness to these schools. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, you had 2 bands that performed during the play introductions.
Right.
I can't remember the name of those 2 bands though, Brian. Help me out with those 2 names.
Well, I know you had Grambling State that was part of Team Giannis.
No. I'm thinking about that. There was another band, the marching something. I can't remember.
Yes, sir.
yes, I am.
Partnered with Team LeBron, of course. Given the LeBron FAMU connection, it's no surprise that Team LeBron would be introduced by the Marching 100. I couldn't believe that Team LeBron was only a 4.5 point favorite, by the way. When I saw the roster of who was on, I really didn't have a clue of who was on his team. But when I saw those introductions and saw who was on his team, I instantly texted a buddy. I said, what is the line on this game? Because doggone it, that's not a super squad that LeBron put together. There's some serious point shaving going on by Kevin Durant or who was the guy last year, who was the captain last year. But LeBron seems to be
correct me if,
best players.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but ever since they've gone to this format, Hasn't LeBron's team won every time?
Yes, because LeBron picks the best guys. I have no idea what the other guy. I think this is the second time Kevin Durant has been the guy, and
because Curry was it 1 year,
and he picked his buddies. He picked Draymond, picked Clay. It was like
Clay. And,
you just realize who LeBron picked Giannis, Kawhi. It's like, come on, dude, how are you gonna win? You keep picking your buddies, So it's been heavy team LeBron for like the last 3 or 4 years, but he's a better GM, which leads me to think. Look, I don't know if LeBron's got a future in being a GM, but he does a good job picking all-star teams.
Picking the team at the park is one thing. Figuring out how to pay him is something different.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Any other observations?
I loved the game was good. I just wish that Team Durant would at least won one quarter to have some money going to the UNCF. The Thurgood Marshall Fund made off like a fat rat in that particular game.
They didn't win
because they won not only the 3 quarters but the overall game also.
Wow. See, I think just because of that, Durant and Kyrie and all those guys need to all pony up $10,000 and make a donation because of that. You know, that's horrible. That's horrible. A couple observations from myself. Now, this is a little uniform thing that I think our guy, Brian Simpkins, pointed out. I saw a tweet from Brian, and he noted that obviously I mentioned earlier that this year was supposed to be an all-star game in Indiana. Well, if you look at the jersey design, first off, the 2 team colors did you notice, were gold and royal blue. Those were the
Indiana Pacers.
Indiana Pacer colors, right? Also, right. In the middle, the uniform was sort of designed in one of those, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s Pacer styles that the Pacers had, which a very similar design where they had the word Pacers over the chest, and it had a line that went through the word.
I remember that. That was like when Reggie first got there in the late 80s, excuse me.
Yeah, it had to be it was definitely one of the early Reggie uniforms, because I know Chuck Person.
Chuck Person, Steve Stepanovich era.
They used to have those jerseys. So
yeah,
you're right. So that was a sort of homage, and like I said, probably it would have fit better in Indianapolis, but I think as the tweet said, they were so, whether it be last minute or lazy, whatever you want to call it, they probably had that design already prepared, and so they just went with it and didn't bother changing.
They probably had the jerseys in there, and all they had to do was just press the numbers on the jersey for whoever made the team. But Brian, I am going to take you back. If you remember the Atlanta Hawks back in the 70s,
yes,
they did have those colors. Back in the Pistol Pete era, of the Atlanta Hawks.
Really?
Yes.
Atlanta Hawks.
Maybe not quite the same blue, but I'm trying to give Atlanta a pass on this one.
Yeah, I don't know about that one though, Drew. I'm looking. I just typed in go Mr. Pete jerseys. Yeah.
If you they were blue, green, gold, or something like that. Had a little green highlight in them and white.
I think
that was before they went to the Dominique, the more traditional cardinal and gold that we see now.
No, okay. Hawks. So I will say you're right that the Hawks had something similar to that, but it wasn't Pistol Pete. It was the Dominique era. It was the Dominique era with Doc Rivers, where it said Hawks. It was. But
Hawks. Not in that color scheme, though.
Well, no, not in that color scheme.
But that color scheme goes back to the 70s, though.
I don't see that. It's you go do a Google search, and I promise you will see just type in Atlanta Hawks Pistol Pete jersey, and you'll see a blue with a Seahawk green thing going.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about. That's the one I'm thinking
No,
about.
this is that's what you're thinking about. No, this is
Yeah,
Indiana Pacers royal and blue, gold and blue. That's what this is.
yeah.
So
I'm trying to give him a pass, Brian.
yeah, nah, you can't do that. Nice try though. I like
Okay.
you had me going down the dive looking at old Pistol Pete jerseys. I will say this that I thought was interesting though, and then we'll kind of move off of this.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavill of Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network.
They can follow their dreams.
There's two things I want to bring up. One, while talking about HBCUs and the NBA, I found it kind of interesting that right now, currently in the league, there's only one HBCU alum on an active roster, and that's
And he was represented in the All-Star game, or in the All-Star weekend.
yes, Covington. God, I can't think of his first name. Robert Covington.
Robert
of Tennessee
State.
He actually participated in the skills contest, wore his Tennessee State or wore a Tennessee State jersey. And I believe, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he donate some of his winnings, or didn't he give out a scholarship or something like that?
Yes, he did. He did. I believe that was pre-competition, and of course, we know he's donated like $1 million for a practice facility at Jackson State, also.
Tennessee State, right?
Tennessee State, excuse me.
Yes. So, and so that was awesome. He's the only active. I think the Kyle O'Quinn of Norfolk State was in the league maybe last year or right before the bubble. So maybe he's just not on a team right now. I don't know that he retired per se, but because he's only about 8 or 9 years from, no, hell, it's probably been 10 years now since he graduated from Norfolk State. But anyway, I just found that interesting. And then I went even deeper, Drew. I went to the G League. You know, in the G League, there are only 3 HBCU grads in the G League. That's the developmental league of the NBA. And they happen to all be Tennessee State players. So when you talk about...
They could sure use them this year at Tennessee State.
Yeah, they damn sure could. I just find it interesting that, you know, and now look, I'm not saying that teams gotta, you know, have to that we want them to reserve a spot for HBCU player. Look, the best of the best get into the G League, get into the NBA. I mean, that's just how it is, and the cream always rises to the top. But when we talk about exposure and opportunities, sometimes you need a chance. And so you're hoping that with all of these things that the NBA is doing to be involved with HBCUs and give HBCU student athletes opportunities, it's more than just the front office stuff, that maybe it'll lead to some of these guys who showcase their ability to actually getting a shot, even if it's at the developmental level, and then be able to work their way up. Because I don't know, you know, there's probably some guys that if you give them the opportunity, they may impress, and they may be able to show that they can play. I mean, look, it's hard. The percentages don't favor most players making it into the NBA, you know, but they're up. The thing about basketball, it's global. So there's opportunities all over the world, you know.
Brian, I spent 5 years coaching in the SIAC. I've spent even longer around the SIAC. Just in the SIAC, which is a Division II conference, let's keep this in mind, I've seen some talent come through that conference that should have at least gotten a crack or a sniff at least making it to training camp to see where they can play at. I've had people who played for me when I was coaching who had the talent to get there, but didn't have the name or didn't have the right agent or didn't have some of the other things that the person right up the road from us at the Division I SEC school happened to have. So yeah, anything that we could do to increase the exposure, because you put them in the gym, then they'll do more than hold their own. And I'm gonna be real with you, Bryan. You know as well as I do. If you need a real guard, a true guard, go to HBCU basketball. Be it on the Division I level in the SWAC and the MEAC, or be it on the Division II level in the SIAC or CIAA, because black college basketball is a guards game. I have seen some tremendous guards, ball handlers, scorers, you name it, they could do it from the guard position in black college basketball. So that's what black college basketball is about. And in the wide open NBA, especially in today's game, that the game that they're playing now has been played in black college basketball for the last 40 years, Bryan.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of thought to go look and see. And it's one of those things that I think, as we move the discussion forward, or as you start to move into the future year or years, again, this seems to be something that the NBA is committed. I saw a video with an executive vice president of the NBA. This was via, I think, Jared Carter of HBCU Digest had an interview with the gentleman's name escapes me right at the moment, but I thought it was a good interview because it pointed out and asked the question, is this, how did this come about? Is this focus on HBCUs for an all-star event that the players initially didn't even want? Was this just, hey, let's throw some money at something good and make everybody feel good? Or, hey, is this something that is for real? I mean, are we really dedicated? Because the funny thing about the HBCU and the NBA relationship, it's not organic, in my opinion. There's no feed from HBCU basketball to the NBA. Let's just be real. It's not. That the minor league system for the NBA is the ACC, the Big East, the Big Ten, the power conferences, the Big 12, Pac-12. That's the feeder system. And then really it started to be international. So small school basketball, HBCU basketball, is very low on the totem pole in terms of what filters the players. But we do have to recognize that the players are Black. They're mostly African-American players, young men. So
and I was going to bring that point out because I want you to think about this, Bryan. All those high school players who go to those P5 schools, where do their teammates tend to wind up at?
Yeah, a lot of their teammates.
Their high school teammates.
Yeah, small schools.
Yep. Small schools, HBCUs. And they boys, when they came back over the summer, or they even to this day, 5-10 years later, they talk about what's the one thing Chris Webber even said it. And I can't remember his name, but if you remember when we were at FAMU, the same guy the point guard at Country Day High School in Detroit, Michigan, who was Chris Webber's point guard in high school, was our point guard at Florida A&M.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember his name to this day.
Right.
But you don't think they used to talk when they used to be back in Detroit together?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're doing the big at Michigan, but bro, let me tell you about this experience that I'm having at Florida A&M.
And that's a good point that you bring up. because it does talk about the fact that a guy like Chris Webber may look like he has everything. He has
Professor Webber now.
Is he a professor?
At Morehouse.
Really? Chris Webber? Really? Okay. I did not know that.
Yes,
Okay.
he's teaching a class at Morehouse now.
Good for
sports and culture, something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but he is teaching a class at Morehouse now.
Okay. Well, I guess my point was going to be it just brings up this what looks like is roses and a rose garden from a distance may not always be. And there's different kind of pressures that those young men deal with because I think that's one of the things this Black Lives Matter movement over the past year has shown. We've seen how young African-American athletes are dealing with the interactions from alumni bases, mostly white, mostly with large pockets who give major money, that we've seen the friction there, have we not? And so there's a different level of pressure, the expectation of coming in and playing. And so now that we are in a different age where we care about how you feel and how you think about things versus when we were growing up, didn't nobody give two flips about how I felt or how you felt. It was just, hey, you got to do this. We need you to do this. This is what's supposed to be done. Different time. But
think about the athletes in the state of Mississippi who, because of what they started, led to the Confederate flag coming down in the state of Mississippi.
Right.
Think about what's going on at the University of Texas right now, where they're fighting over this song that's tradition that people are saying is not offensive, and why should we change this song when we're talking about 5% of our student body? Yeah, you may be talking about 5% of your student body, but of that 5%, that 5% is 70% of your football team or 80% of your basketball team.
Which brings in how much dollars?
Which right, and forget all the other sports. No offense to baseball and everything else. Those are your two money makers.
Yes, sir. Right.
Yeah, there may be 5% of the overall student population, but that 5% controls your revenue.
Is humongous.
Yeah.
Great study.
So I'm still waiting to see how the athletes at University of Texas respond to this controversy over this song.
Yeah,
because they have the power.
They,
if they don't decide not to play.
Yeah. Well, look, that's one of those stories I think we'll have to pay attention to over the summer. Let me finish with this, and then we'll go to a quick break. The article, the one last thing I wanted to mention about the NBA and the All-Star weekend, a gentleman by the name of Rod Benson of the SF Gate, the San Francisco Gate. Well, I don't know. Why do I call it? I'm calling it, San Francisco Gate. Yeah, just SF Gate. sfgate.com. He writes that the NBA is using the Black national anthem as a symbol and it's not working. Now, I will say this about this article. And again, Rod Benson, SF Gate, and the title again, his commentary, that NBA is using the Black national anthem as a symbol and it's not working. On just the headline alone and then the first couple paragraphs, they are a bit like, huh? What? Why is he hating on the Black College National Anthem? Or not the Black College National, the Black National. We're so used to singing it and hearing it at colleges. It's almost weird hearing it at an all-star game. Now, I don't know about you. When I heard it, I was already standing, but I literally stopped where I was and kind of sung along. But we're used to standing up and singing when we hear that song at college games, are we not? So
I'm gonna hold my comment on that till you finish.
Well, so the article talks about how Lift Every Voice and Sing really kind of fell on deaf ears, and really it was kind of like, why, what you're playing this, why? I mean, what's the purpose of playing this when the NBA is missing out on a bigger picture, and that bigger picture being at the same time that these all-star festivities are happening in Atlanta, the Georgia House had passed a bill designed to restrict the voting rights of minorities, especially Black people. And that earlier in that same week, the Georgia Senate had passed their own restrictive bill on the heels of Supreme Court cases. So all of this stuff going on in Georgia by Georgia Republicans to limit black votes in the state of Georgia, where look, they flipped an entire state red to blue. People are trying to change and create laws so that does not happen again, or at least they want to make it tough for African Americans to vote the way they did this past election. So this article points out that you didn't hear any of that coming out from the NBA, LeBron James, anybody else about the Georgia voter suppression that's going on. Even though they may be doing things in the background, they're not talking about it in public, but instead they're giving you the ceremonial lift every voice and sing, but they're not listening to the voices. So again, the article I thought starts off a little choppy, and you're reading it and you're kind of like, huh? But if you chew it slowly and make it through the entire article, I think you'll say, wow, yeah, why didn't the NBA do that? And so again, it brings me back to the programming and the messaging that the NBA is sending. And you know, we've got to be aware of what's going on. So before we just jump up and praise the NBA for being down for HBCUs, let's make sure that we hold them accountable for using the platform the right way and not in a way that is ceremonial when it really does nothing for anybody. I'll defer to you, Drew, and then we'll go to break.
All right. Number one, lift every voice and sing. Yes, because of where we went to school and the college that we were in while we were at that school. Lift every voice and sing resonates a little bit different for you and for I. Yes, I found myself singing along just like you. Yes, like 95% of most of African Americans, I still do not know verses 2 and verses 3. But I can sing verse 1 all day long. But I can't sing past the first verse in Amazing Grace either. So what's the difference? That's that. But and you absorb this how you want to, Brian. The NBA tried it, did it. There are a lot of our black colleges who do not play Lift Every Voice and Sing before they start their events, but play the national anthem. So we can't beat up on the NBA when we're not even doing it at our HBCUs.
That's interesting. I thought every HBCU was playing it.
Brian, how many basketball games have you been to? How many football games have you been to and heard Lift Every Voice and Sing?
I honestly, Drew, I think I've heard it at just about all of them. The Florida Memorial games.
I have not.
I could have sworn they
played
Lift Every Voice and Sing at the Florida Memorial.
I'm not gonna call any school out in particular, but our schools do not play Lift Every Voice and Sing. And think about this.
Do you think they should?
Yes, they should.
Okay.
It's the Negro National, where it used to be called the Negro National Anthem. It is the Black National Anthem now, but it was the Negro National Anthem when we were coming up.
Right.
Yes, it should be played. Just like if you're in Canada and you have, or if you have Canadian visitors playing in your building, you play the Canadian National Anthem before you play the Star Spangled Banner. Right. Yes, it should be played. No doubt about it. So until we fix that on our HBCU campuses, we can't say nothing about what the NBA should or should not do.
I guess I'm at a point where
that's point number one.
They haven't been doing it before. and then all of a
but we're not doing it either. So we have no room to talk about them.
I got you. Fair point. Continue.
That's my point.
Gotcha.
Number two, when it comes to what just happened in Georgia with the All-Star game, Keisha Bottom, FAMU graduate, had the opportunity to host it. Yeah, Georgia needed the money, Atlanta needed the money. But you're right. There's something bigger here in the state of Georgia. I want you to think about two things and the power of sports and how sports can change things. Do you know how the New Orleans Saints came to be, Brian?
No, I don't.
Okay. The AFL All-Star game, I forgot what city it was originally supposed to be hosted in, and I think the year was 1965.
I know this
story. They moved the All-Star game to the city of New Orleans because New Orleans was progressive at that point in time, and because wherever the original All-Star game was supposed to be hosted at, and I want to say it was in Florida. Don't quote me on that. I had to go back and pull the story, but they would not let the black athletes stay in hotels. This was still in the Jim Crow era. New Orleans was progressive at that point in time. They moved the All-Star game to New Orleans because the black players refused to play. And 2 years later, you had the Saints in the NFL because that city showed how progressive they were in a changing culture. That's number one. Number two, remember how we got the Martin Luther King holiday in the state of Arizona? The NFL, Phoenix was supposed to host the Super Bowl. They would not pass the King holiday in that state.
Right.
They pulled the Super Bowl out of Arizona. This was in the early 90s. I want to say 91 was when they were supposed to originally host it, and they didn't wind up hosting it to like 93 and 94 when they finally passed the bill that legalized the King holiday in Arizona. So what could have happened with all this stuff that's going on in Georgia? Yeah, NBA, you did good by focusing on HBCUs, but yes, you did miss that bigger picture because there should have been more pressure put on not only by the NBA, but there are many corporations here in the state of Georgia. You've got Delta, you've got Coca-Cola, you've got plenty of corporations based in Atlanta. You've got banks based in Atlanta. These corporations need to put the pressure on the politicians, on that few, to open up the elections. Let the will of the people decide, not restrict them. And not only here in Georgia, but any other state that is going through and trying to restrict voting rights. This is America. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave. But you just can't vote you just can't vote how you want to. You got to vote how I say I need you to vote.
Right.
I'm off my political soapbox now.
Just for clarification, the 1965 American Football League All-Star game is what you're referring to. That was supposed to be played in New Orleans because they did think New Orleans was progressive enough, and they had actually certain agreements in place that would allow black and white players alike. They thought that players
to stay in the same hotel.
Right. They thought they would be welcome. Well, when they got there, they realized that that wasn't the case as promised. And then that's when the black players basically said, we're not playing in this game. And eventually it took some white players joining in with the protesting black players to actually get that game canceled. The game was called in New Orleans. It was canceled. And it was eventually moved to right down Interstate 10 to Houston, which welcomed all players. And so the game did happen to go off in New Orleans, or excuse me, in Houston in 1965. And it just so happened that 2 years later is when the NFL's New Orleans Saints actually joined the league. But that was a wake up call for New Orleans right there, and it was that's one of those moments that you were just talking about. All right, Drew, let's take a break.
Right.
When we come back, we got more basketball talk. We're going to actually get into talking about some HBCU games, some postseason play that's going on, some conference awards. We got shakeups happening in our rankings, the final players of the week before we get into our national players of the year. All of that coming up in just a moment. You are listening to the BCSN SportsWrap with Bryan and A.D. We'll be back right after these words.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1.